Hi, everybody. Welcome to another Ask Professor Paranormal, our second for November, and we only have two more past this as well. But welcome, everybody. It's good to see some folks coming in. I can see a couple of names I recognize for sure, and it's a little chilly here in the Bay Area today, but kind of a nice kind of change for the fall, of course. So as always. For those of you who might be new, I answer your questions or comment on things. You can just bring up topics if you want related to parapsychology, which is the full range of psychic phenomena, dealing with the paranormal, all that stuff. And we could even talk a little bit about pop culture, movies, and things like that, as well as chocolate. So, chocolate is one of my favorite things to talk about. And yes, please don't forget to subscribe, to like and subscribe. Tell your friends. It's always good to get more people coming in and with more unique questions as well. So just as kind of a catch up, last weekend I was actually in North Carolina most of last week in the Raleigh-Durham area. And we had a kind of a party of sorts at the Ryan Research Center in Durham, North Carolina, to more or less say goodbye for the building. And this is something you probably hear about, and we have to make sure we get the messaging out right because people were worried that the Ryan Research Center was going under because we have to move. But basically, our landlord was getting old on in years, and his family decided to sell the building without asking us anything. We've been leasing for over 25 years. So we are going to be out of that building in mid-December, the old building that's been the Ryan Research Center for 25 years, and looking around for new space. And actually, this time, the Ryan Center is in such good shape these days that we're actually going to be able to buy space instead of having to lease it. We're very, very happy about that. Even got approval from the bank. So we're really happy that this is in the 90th anniversary year of the founding of the Duke Parapsychology Laboratory by J.B. and Louisa Rhine, and William McDougall. We're going to be able to, in the 91st year, actually move into new space, which we hope to expand and do a lot more with. Although a lot of stuff is going to still be online, of course. I say we because I am president of the board of directors of the Ryan Research Center. The funny thing is that the hardest thing about the move, besides finding new space, is taking apart the isolation rooms, which are built as Faraday cages. They're big metal boxes. So I don't have to worry about that. We also had a board meeting where we discussed kind of the new space we're looking for. So if anybody happens to be in the Raleigh-Durham area or knows about commercial real estate and is interested in helping us, please let me know because we are looking for space in that way. Kathy, you're in Norfolk, went to the chocolate farm. I'm not even familiar with the chocolate farm, Kathy. So you'll have to kind of inform us about that. For those of you who are new enough to hearing me, watching me here, and don't really know, because I don't always talk about this on other interviews unless somebody asks, I also have a certificate as a professional chocolatier, something I do kind of on the side from time to time. I was doing it a lot more about 10 years ago, actually selling chocolate, and that was probably going to be my retirement plan, actually, to make and sell chocolate. So it's always fun. And there's a connection between chocolate and psychic phenomena as well, if somebody would like to hear about that. Um, Thorncrest Farm in Goshen. Okay. I assume they make chocolate there. They can't grow it there. Weather is not appropriate to grow cacao. But I've been to a whole bunch of really good chocolate places and recently did a couple chocolate tastings for folks too. That's something else I do. And of course, Graveyard Grog, if she pets the chocolate bunnies, they tend to melt. All right. Question came in. If someone happened to be a proficient astral projector, somebody who can go out of body frequently, I assume, what would be some good tests or experiments that could be set up? Oh, that's a really good one. So there have been experiments over the years with out of body experiences and a couple of different types of experiments, but the easiest would be for the person going out of body, astral projecting. We don't really use astral projection as a term anymore. For a person going out, have a friend who you can consciously, if it's you that's going out of body, when you go out of body, you'll need to decide or intend to go to visit someone or someplace. And you need to have a friend who will find some photographs, probably pictures, it could be art or something like that, something easy to identify that you don't know about, and then have that at that location. And when you go out of body, you go to that location, you note the room that it's in, like they should decide what room to even put it in if it's their house or something else. Note the room that it's in, and it should be on prominent display or on a table that you can see if you're out of body. And then really take a look at that. And when you come back, immediately write stuff down. The key here is because there is a difference between out of body experience or astral projection and remote viewing. In out of body experience, out of body projection, people, their consciousness or part of their consciousness goes to the location and it feels to the person that they are going there. In remote viewing, you just pick the information up. And the only analogy I can give you to real life is if you are watching either the Oscars live or a football game or baseball game, when you are watching on your TV, you are remote viewing a live event. If you were to go to the Oscars and sit in the audience, if you go to that football or baseball game and sit there and watch it, that's out of body. I mean, even though you're there physically. So it's a different experience altogether for that. Jody Music. All right, so all right, so here's the connection between chocolate and psychic phenomena. A number of years ago, a chocolate company in Hawaii and talked to Dean Radin, who's a leading researcher in parapsychology, about doing something with intentional chocolate. This chocolate company was had their cacao plantation in Hawaii next to a Buddhist monastery, and the Buddhist monks were really curious about the cacao and would come over and bless the plants, and they made really good chocolate. So Dean came up with an idea for an experiment based on the idea that food made with love, this is folklore, of course, food made with love is better for you, tastes better, your body likes it better, things like that. And what was done was that as a pilot experiment, because it wasn't a full-blown like multi-hundred person experiment, that still needs to be done, is the chocolate company made a lot of chocolate, a bunch of chocolate, basically a batch. And that was split into 4 different portions. One portion was prayed over by a Buddhist monk who, in the prayer, put in the intention that this chocolate will be more mood enhancing and more energizing than any other chocolate you've had. A second condition was actually a Mongolian shaman happened to be at the Institute of Noetic Sciences doing a ritual and doing a workshop. And so this Mongolian shaman did a ritual over the chocolate, knowing when it would be given to the participants, because it had a expiration date, apparently. Again, same message. Third condition, there was an engineer who developed a crystal device using a crystal, and the Buddhist monk went in and prayed over that. And the idea of the crystal electronic device would record the intention, the psychic intention. And then that was placed in an isolation room with the third batch of chocolate, and it was played back for many hours. Again, same intention. And the fourth sample, nobody did anything with, just was made from there. I think there were 60 or 59 people. The volunteers they had no idea which sample they got. They didn't even know the conditions. All they knew is they had to fill out a mood survey before they had the chocolate and after they had the chocolate. And here was the tough part for them. Twice a day, 10 in the morning, 3 in the afternoon, they had to eat a half an ounce of chocolate slowly after doing the mood enhancer. So for 3 days. So they were stuck having to have really good chocolate. I personally, I think we could actually self-fund this by just selling the chocolate to people who just wanted to try the experiment. All right, so then all the data comes back. these mood responses and all that comes back. And Dean is looking at, he doesn't know as he's analyzing whether it's A, B, C, or D is what condition. He doesn't know which one's control, anything else. And he's doing the analysis of the data. And interestingly enough, it was pretty clear that one sample was not as mood enhancing or energizing as the other three samples. That turned out to be the control sample, in fact. And the one that did the best was apparently the one with the crystal circuit that supposedly recorded the intention. But all three of them did many percent, percentage points, huge percentage points. It was beyond significant in that. He repeated that experiment with tea. Same thing. The ones that were given an intention did better for mood, for energizing, alertness, all of that stuff. And all of that suggests one important thing. Number one, food made with love is better for you. But number two, if you get food from a fast food place and there's teenagers running it and they hate being there, that food is less good for you than maybe a true happy meal you could get where the people making the food are in a great mood. So always keep that in mind. And if you're making food for people, try to laugh, try to have fun. Otherwise, you may be creating a bad environment for the food to be in. All right, Kathy, I've worked two public events the past year, and two separate people have uh, tried me to do energy experiment with them. Both were unsuccessful. Both used my hands held out. They were trying to push my hands together with their energy and failed, and both got mad. They probably would have got mad at me too. Your abilities, Kathy, as a medium may not fit in with what they were trying to do. Other people might have been successful for other people, but frankly, I don't know why people do that. I really don't know why they try to do that. Not everybody has the same abilities. As Kathy Nadal knows, one statement we often make in the mediumship research world and in parapsychology is all mediums are psychic, but not all psychics are mediums, which is important to remember. There are mediums who can do other things besides mediumship, but there are many mediums who are only doing mediumship, and they do it really well. But it's like an artist who can paint in a certain style and can't draw, or with a pen and pencil, or can't sculpt. People have aptitudes for certain things for that. All right. So once we've gotten past the chocolate statement, you think they wanted to stump you. Well, that was pretty stupid on their part. You know, Years ago, I did several shows for Japanese television with a medium named Aiko Gibo, very famous medium in Japan. And the shows there were specials around her ability. She actually worked with police over in Japan. She did a lot of stuff over there. And the crew brought her to the US. And for each episode we did, although we went out of the country a couple times, they wanted me to take her to a haunted place, because they love ghost stories. And they also wanted to do an experiment. So we tried different kinds of experiments with Mrs. Gibo. And it was wonderful for me to work with a psychic. And I've worked with others like this who basically said, well, gee, I've never tried that. Let's see if I can do it. And if she couldn't do it, she said, okay, so that's one thing I know I can't do. That was her response. She did things that she had never tried before. She did really well at some things, did not do well at others. And that's the thing, is that we're human. We're not good at everything. But these people, maybe they tried to stump you because they thought that had something to do with mediumship. Who knows at that point? It's a very bizarre thing when people try to do that. But it's kind of like when I'm performing as a mentalist, I sometimes get people who say, tell me what I'm thinking. If you're such a mentalist or can do this sort of thing, and I'm only doing it in an entertainment context, tell me what I'm thinking. And frankly, I don't really want, even if I could really read people's minds deeply, what I usually tell people is you really don't want me rooting around in there because I might find something you don't want me to know, and I might get grossed out. So always a good thing to say. All right. What else we got for today here? we kind of got on the chocolate side. And by the way, if people want some chocolate recommendations, I'm perfectly happy to provide you with some good sources for really, really good chocolate, since I'm not making it right now myself. All right, I did have a question that came was a comment on last time's show, and that's something I want to actually tell folks is for anybody who's watching this on recording, if you have a question for me to answer in the next show, next live show, whether I do go back a few shows and look and see if there's any new comments, put the question there. I might give you a reply right there, but I will typically bring it forward to the next show that I can do. So I just want to encourage you either to email me. My email is in the channel description, to do it as a reply, even if you've seen this particular, as some of you are here with me live right now. Um, give me the questions. I'm perfectly happy to get some other questions. So I'll get back to I'll get to that question that was on there here in a minute. Jody, I always show up to be a bad influence to distract with chocolate questions. That's not a distraction for me whatsoever, maybe for everybody else. All right. So the question came is what I think about black-eyed children and shadow people, specifically the Hat Man. First, I have no opinion on black-eyed children. If there are children with full black eyes, I don't know how that would be, unless they are psychic. This has nothing to do with parapsychology. We study psychic experiences, psychic phenomena, ESP, psychokinesis, mind over matter. We cover issues of survival of bodily death. So if the kids are talking about a past life, then that might be involved. But if they're just black-eyed kids, people were asking about indigo kids years ago. If they're not psychic, we have nothing to do with them. You can ask me all you want about ETs, but unless the aliens are here and they're telepathic or something like that, why would we even, be involved in that? So we don't deal with that. The shadow people thing, it's a little confusing, honestly, because so much of the shadow stuff comes from shadows seen in on video and especially on night shot cameras. People do forget for that segment. I'm going to get to the experiential stuff in a moment, but for that segment, the important thing to know is that there is a spotlight on a night shot camera. It projects infrared, and infrared, even though it's infrared and you can't see it, and even though it's dark, what you see on video can be shadows cast by the people and other things, because the infrared spotlight, is casting a shadow. So that's an important thing to remember. If you experience seeing a shadowy figure and something, that's a different story. And we tend to think that most of those could be you, the receiver. So let's say I walk into a haunted place and I see a shadow figure and it's moving down a hallway. It very well could be that someone else comes in at another time and instead of seeing a shadow figure walking down the hallway, sees a fully formed 3D human being walking down the hallway. We talk about residual hauntings. We talk about apparitions or ghosts. The only way you can see that ghost or see that apparition or see that residual haunting is perceptually. You're not seeing it. It's with ESP. You're not seeing it with your eyes. So you may see a shadow, or I may see a shadow, because as the information's coming into my psychic ability, I'm not clear enough on the signal. I'm not getting the full signal, and my brain is making it a shadow instead of a clear image. I mean, people reported fuzzy figures, not just shadows. So that's one piece of it, that it's often the person who's perceiving the shadow, not the entity themselves. Because there's not a physical form there for you to see. It's an image. Now, that also could be, we had one case years ago where it was a interior design warehouse and workshop here in the Bay Area. And they had a loft where they were storing a lot of fabric. In fact, there was this presence that seemed to be very depressed, and people would occasionally see this blobby shadow figure up there, not even humanoid in some respects. And there was even some other stuff that was there, including, interestingly enough, an Etch-a-Sketch, which had in beautiful cursive help on it one morning. Um, brought in someone to communicate, and you could feel the depression up there in the rolls of fabric. They started calling him Dacron Bob because they got the sense it was a male and very depressed, and in the rolls of Dacron fabric. Um, the person I brought in picked up on him, and we actually got enough information to identify this was a guy who was jogging by on the trail that went right by the warehouse outside, and he died of a massive heart attack right outside. And according to the communication, he didn't know where to go. He didn't know what was going on. He was totally depressed about dying. He was totally depressed about being stuck. He thought he was stuck. And at one point, he said he feels like a blot on the face of the earth. And so that's what he was projecting, a blot on the face of the earth, a shadowy blot or blob. She worked through him or worked with him and got him to move on. So that's a perceptual thing. That's the individual, the entity, projecting that image as well. It also could be somebody who's more of a bully in life and dies and projects that they're trying to scare you. That's possible too. The Hat Man thing, I don't know what to make of that, honestly. I don't. I hear that people have seen the Hat Man, the shadow figure with a fedora hat shape, but I've not heard. I mean, the people have told me about this. There's not firsthand accounts. So it could be some pop culture folklore or folklore in general, like the hitchhiking ghost. There have been hitchhiking ghosts back as far as Roman times. So could be that or something else. All right, Nigel, let's see. Thank you. I'm glad you liked the show. With millions of people pass away, were there a few videos with proof of ghosts? Well, first of all, in science, we don't look for proof. You don't look for proof of anything. You look for evidence. And then you accept the evidence, you have a model for it, and then when new evidence comes to light, you might change that. So it's not always proof is not the same as proof in the law. Let's put it that way. Video is never proof, never even really good evidence, honestly, of a ghost. Experiences are better evidence, and the best evidence comes from communication or information that comes through, even if it's just somebody describing who the ghost is, not knowing anything about the individual, and then finding out that the description matches the entity that's being seen. So first of all, I think part of your question is, with all the people who have passed away, most of them don't stick around because we would have a lot more apparitional sightings. In fact, the majority of apparition sightings, it's probably 95% of all ghost sightings are by people who knew the person when they were alive, and they see or experience some form of that person at the moment of death or within 2 to 3 days after the person dies. And they never see the person again or experience that individual again. It's like they're going out and saying goodbye to everybody. I had that happen with a late friend of mine, although he took a week and a half to get to me, but a lot of other people saw him as well, had experience with the same experience with him as well. So most move on to whatever the other side is, whatever the next level of existence is. The ones who stick around have varying reasons why they stick around, and those range. There's no one single reason because there's no one single stereotype person who dies and sticks around as a ghost. We can't videotape them, video record them because there's nothing optical. The apparition would have to affect the recording device, the camera, or the recording medium to even show up at all. There's nothing to reflect light. I mean, there's so many people who take these videos and they ask, or a photograph, they say, is that a ghost? It's like, I can't tell you it's a ghost. It's most likely something photographic. Did you see or experience a ghost when this was happening, when you took the picture? Because if there's not a concurrent experience or perception of an apparition, some way, you hear something, you feel something, you smell something, you see something. If that's not present, you just have a picture that's unusual or a video that's unusual. So that's, again, it's consciousness without a physical form that reflects light or gives off light. Therefore, when we see them, we're seeing them with our mind. We're not seeing them with our eyes or our perceptions in that way. And again, proof, if you can tell me what the proof is of consciousness and a good definition that everybody in science agrees about, that what consciousness is, I'm happy to look for proof for ghosts. But we don't even have that when we know where consciousness is, which is theoretically in the brain. It actually may not be in the brain. There's some other models as well for that. Historically, do you know of one of the oldest known conscious spirits which haunts locations? Um, I mean, there are places in the UK that have been around for hundreds of years, supposedly. Um, I'm sure in other countries. I mean, I don't have a full awareness of the history of individual apparitions all over the world. I mean, there's more hauntings that have repeated, the residual hauntings that repeat. I tend to think that, personally, I think that after several hundred years, unless the ghost likes the person who is the ghost, who is the apparition, likes being a ghost, I tend to think they're going to figure out how to move on or move somewhere else because they're not stuck in a given location at all. All right, let's see. So I can't really answer that question. I haven't really researched that. I can tell you that the earliest ghost hunting experience on record is Artemidorus, a Greek philosopher about 2,000 years ago, who communicated with the ghost in chains and then got enough information to find the body of someone who'd been buried in chains that nobody knew about. So that's the first recorded ghost hunting experience. I would guess the ancient Egyptians ran into something too. Possibly the Mayans or the Olmecs were even older than the Mayans and the Aztecs and the Incas. But we don't have good records. I do recommend, however, there's a book called First Ghosts by Irving Fine. And that is a book about the ghosts recorded in Mesopotamian literature. So the oldest writing comes from Mesopotamia, the Sumerians, Babylonians, that group, and it's cuneiform. And apparently not apparently, there is recorded experiences with ghosts back then. So First Ghost is a good book, a little more academic than you might like, but it's a really good book. Okay, Kathy, what is an event that would like to happen to me which you have not experienced? Could be anything. Okay, I've actually never had a visual outside of my mind's eye, like, as in picturing something in my head, um, a visual perception of an apparition. And I'd like to have an actual conversation with one. I've heard, I've felt, I've been walked through, um, felt stuff, but I have never had a true visual apparitional experience. That's one I would like. Um, Personally, I'd like to have my own communication with an apparition, without having gone through an intermediary. So haven't had that. I've had experiences, but not that. Have you ever encountered sine wave speech during a ghost hunt? Say more about that. So I'm not sure what you're referring to there with sine wave speech. There, Tina. Okay, let's see here. Then I see another one. It sounds like the latest on the UAPs are interdimensional beings. Um, I have to question that. I don't know. I've heard people say that Bigfoot is an interdimensional being, and yeah, that's going a little too far. Um, Maybe they are, but what does that mean? Are you talking about a parallel universe? You're talking about fifth dimension, something like that. Um, you know, how that's different from ghosts is that UAPs, and here we're talking about, if you're talking about the craft themselves, that's very different than ghosts. Ghosts are people. If you're talking about the entities inside the craft, you know, ghosts are not interdimensional. Ghosts are still the ghosts that we talk about, the ones we investigate, the ones that we look at are here. Now, the ones that are talked to by mediums or project back from wherever it is, the so-called other side, that very well may be a different dimension of reality, in which case that would make them having an interdimensional existence. We have interdimensional existence after death, but we don't know what that world is, what that universe is, whether that is truly another dimension, whether it's some other form of reality altogether. It's timeless, spaceless, but what does that mean? So it's really hard to talk in these terms because the terms don't apply to us. So we don't have the terms to describe them. But the UAP thing, I worked in college as a volunteer at the Center for UFO Studies under J. Allen Hynek, and he questioned whether some UFOs, UAPs, were actually nuts and bolts hardware. Some clearly had physical presence, but others he felt might be psychic projections, like Carl Jung talked about. Hard to say. But, if a ghost is in a different dimension here, then there's something, and we know that there's much more to our world than we're capable of perceiving. So that's also possible as well. All right, let's see. So Tina, if you want to come back with sine wave speech and describe that a little bit more, that one might be helpful. Otherwise, I will mention, again, as I started talking about the Rhine Center to start off, that our next group of classes will be starting in February. We haven't posted them yet. It's likely I'll be teaching a field investigations class. I'm not sure what else I'll be teaching. John Kruth will be teaching a research class. We have a couple other classes coming along. I think one will be about out-of-body experiences. I think Graham Nichols is going to be teaching that class starting in February. So the Ryan Education Center's website is listed in the channel description. I'll also put it here. Jody, if you could time travel and return safely from an ancient civilization, where would you go? That's a really good question. If it was safe, and hopefully I had a universal translator or something like that, um, I might want to go back to ancient Sumeria. I think it would be kind of interesting for one of the first civilizations to see what was there. Um, I also would really like to visit ancient Crete before Santorini, Thera, blew up, which killed most of the Cretan civilization. The Minoan Crete might be really interesting too for that. Um, Trying to think, maybe the Incas just would, I majored in cultural anthropology in college, and we did some looking at, I took some courses in some of the ancient peoples. I also think that ancient China would be really interesting, and even ancient India, very interesting. We in the West don't always know that, or think about the fact that India had a 5,000-year history, that China had that same kind of really huge history as well. Okay. Lucas, notice that you are only one subscriber away from 666 subs. Well, somebody should find somebody to subscribe today, so we're at 666. You may not be, probably not aware of this, but for many years, when people in psychic, paranormal, or psychic organizations would try to get a phone number, they establishing an office or getting a phone number from the phone company. Some psychics had this problem too. Somebody at the phone company in assigning the phone numbers would always include a 666 in the number, like it's some sort of joke, or maybe because they felt that this was demonic or satanic or something like that. But, you know, not that weird. It just happens as well. So I'll try to keep in mind and try to look for one that switches over to 666. And then hopefully we'll switch over to 667 pretty quick. There's a lot of folklore around biblical mythology. So much of it comes from the book of Revelations, which scholars really think was not really related to the Bible, but was more of a biblical allegory for ancient Rome, for the Roman Empire more than anything else. So, Mary Prankster, have you seen the experiments of someone called Dr. Stephen Greer? I just really don't. I know who Stephen Greer is. I do not follow UAP stuff at all. Um, I I've heard that he supposedly has telepathic communication with UAPs. Again, he can claim all he wants, and maybe there is something. He also might be psychically projecting stuff. 665 is a neighbor of the beast. It's great. Yeah, so I really don't follow UAP stuff, and Greer is very controversial in a lot of ways. Okay, going back to your other question from Kathy, if you could select who you would like to communicate with, who would it be, personal or a famous person? Well, I have been able to communicate with a couple people, my dad and Martin Caden, um, from now, with mediums, certain mediums over the years. Um, Certainly love to communicate with my dad again, but I think I would like to communicate with, well, at this point in time, I would truly like to communicate with a researcher, investigator named Tony Cornell. There is a book out. For those who don't know that name, Tony Cornell was a lead investigator for the Society for Psychical Research for over 50 years. I got to meet him. I communicated with him in the late 90s because I was doing something for Fate magazine. And I got to meet him when he came to New York in the early 2000s for the publication and release of his book, Investigating the Paranormal, which is sadly out of print. It was kind of like selections of cases from 50 years, from his 50 years of investigations. And Tony was one of the first people to put together environmental sensors in one place, um, because we all in parapsychology were trying to figure out what's going on in the environment when people have experiences. I got to meet him and spend time with him on a full day workshop that we did for the Parapsychology Foundation, who is the publisher for his book. And you can actually watch the presentations, which included myself, Tony Cornell, Carlos Alvarado, one of my fellow graduates from the JFK Parapsychology program, just incredibly knowledgeable about the history of parapsychology, and Hans Holzer presented as well. And it's on the Parapsychology Foundation's YouTube channel. And the workshop is called The Reality of Ghost Busting. There's two parts. So the reason I say Tony is because he was incredibly knowledgeable. He had incredible experiences over the years. I really enjoyed speaking with him. He had an incredibly good sense of humor. There were some funny things that actually happened that day when we're especially listening to Holzer present. And I'd like to kind of, pick his brain a little bit, his non-corporeal brain, his post-death brain at this point. So I really, that's who I would like to talk to. There's a great book that I'm about halfway through now that just came out called Chasing the Dark, by Matthew, I think, Meacham. But this is a book about Tony Cornell. It's also about the history of parapsychology, history of psychical research, the history of investigation. You want to know about this? There's two books right now I recommend if you want to know about the start of real investigations into ghosts and hauntings. One is called Ghost Hunting excuse me, The Ghost Hunters by Deborah Blum, which came out more than 10 years ago. And the other is Chasing the Dark, which is really good because it's really from Tony Cornell's papers and his material that the family gave the author access to. So that's who I'd like to talk to in my field anyway. There are some dead magicians I wouldn't mind talking to also. Um, okay, let's see here. Where am I going? What do you think one of your ghost outfits will be? Where would you travel first? I'm not quite sure what you mean by ghost outfits. If you mean what I'm going to wear, it's just going to have to be a shirt like this, of course, maybe with some more ghosts on it. This is my Saturday morning nostalgia shirt. Uh, yeah, a lot of the Hanna-Barbera characters. Let's see here. Mary Prankster, I know the UAPs are a bit off topic, but I'm asking about the point where they can attract apparitions in the sky. I don't, this is back to thinking about talking to Hynek about this. Hynek was very knowledgeable about parapsychology. And Carl Jung talked about the idea that perhaps some flying saucers, because it was much earlier than even calling it a UFO, were actually psychic projections. Just like an apparition projects what they look like to us so we can pick that up, then something was being projected, whether it's from a living mind or something else. And if Greer can really do that, then the question is, what does he conjuring up? What is he? Is it a thought form that he's doing? Is he projecting, or is he actually calling something in? So that's, and I don't know that he would even consider being sitting for some sort of parapsychology experiment in any way, shape, or form. Okay, Randy, personal thoughts about Uri Geller. Obviously a theatrical showman, but several parapsychologists tested him, were convinced he had psychokinetic ability. I'd say a little bit of both. We would call him mixed for sure. And I have met Uri on multiple occasions, although it's been years since I've talked to him. He's a hell of a nice guy. He was even nice to skeptics, the Bay Area skeptics, when they visited a TV talk show here locally that he was on. And Uri, first of all, Uri put himself out as an entertainer. When he was discovered, if you want to say that, by American scientists and brought over to the US for testing, he was discovered in an entertainment context at parties. And honestly, if you can't, if you're bending, if you're doing anything psychokinetically and you can't do it all the time, can't bend spoons all the time, can't do whatever it is you say you can do all the time, and you are hired as an entertainer, you need a backup. You can't say to the people in the audience, hey, folks, I can tell you about my stuff, tell you about my history, but I'm not feeling it today. I can't be psychic. I can't bend stuff. I can't do stuff. So Uri had to have a backup. In fact, anyone performing as an entertainer in any way, shape, or form around the subject would have to have a backup for that. However, he did really well at certain controlled experiments, and actually some of the ones that were then supposedly explained by the amazing Randy and other people, the explanations were totally bizarre and didn't fit the physical conditions at that point. Could not have happened that way. So I'm going to skip forward a little bit. I met Uri because of this local talk show, because he knew someone else. We communicated quite a bit here and there. I got to go to visit his home when he was living in England, in Henley-on-Thames, with Japanese television with Mrs. Gibo. We did a sit down discussion, and I flat out asked him on camera, "Are you a psychic?" And he said, "I'm an entertainer. Everyone has psychic ability." And that's the one thing that I will say about Uri Geller. No matter what you believe about him, his superpower has always been to get other people to do psychic things, to motivate people to bend things, to motivate people to be psychic. He's an amazing motivational speaker and motivator. And that's been pretty clear from other evidence. When we were there, Mrs. Gibo was the receiver of a remote viewing experiment where Uri was the sender, and that was successful. And then a quick anecdote about Uri. One of my magician friends, from somebody from the Psychic Entertainers Association, a very well-respected and incredibly knowledgeable mentalist, at one of our psychic entertainer meetings, came up to me and he said, "I have to tell you something. I was just in England and I had the opportunity to meet Uri Geller. And as many mentalists have had over the years, he's very friendly to magicians and other people. And he said, I brought a heavy spoon from home for him to bend. I didn't know if he would do it or not, but as we're talking at the bar, they were at a pub after the initial meeting. He said, I explained to him what I had. I gave him the spoon, and he said, and then Barry said, he held out my hand. He held my hand, so holding my hand like this. The spoon is, let's see, I've got a spoon here. Somewhere I've got, here we go. So just to give you an example of what Barry told me. So the spoon was on his hand like so, and then Uri would stroke it like this, and the spoon started bending. Now, mind you, this is Barry's spoon from his home in the US. And all Uri was doing was stroking it, and it started to bend. Now, one might say that Uri was able to handle the spoon. Barry was absolutely positive. And again, this is somebody who was incredibly knowledgeable, also had been doing magic for years, knew sleight of hand. There was no distraction. He described it as it happened. So there are times that, Geller can do it, and other times I know he's doing magic. And he had a show called Phenomenon on TV where he was looking for the next Uri Geller and when he would perform, and he was doing mentalism for most of that time, those things. So honestly, mixed, but entertainer. That's important to remember. Uri Geller is an amazing entertainer. Okay. But he could do things under controlled conditions. So, and knowing other performers, many mentalists and magicians do report having flashes of insight or even having physical things happen, PK stuff happening spontaneously. So it's the mindset, you might say, in some respects. Has there been any evidence of animals being psychic? Yeah, yeah. I mean, going back over 100 years, Elliot O'Donnell wrote a book on psychic animals. And I think one of the best examples of animals being psychic would be in something called side trailing with dogs and cats. Somebody moves hundreds of miles away sometimes, and the dog had gotten out and they can't find the dog and they have to leave. Sometimes they're flying, sometimes they're driving, and it's a very, very sad thing when the dog or cat is left behind. They let neighbors know, if you find them, let me know, and we'll come back and get them. And then weeks later, no matter how far away it is, cat finds them, dog finds them. New house, animal had never been there. It's not like the animal can trail the scent of the furniture in the moving van on the highway without getting hit. Somehow those animals find their owners. That's a good example. And if you look up side trailing PSI, that is what that is. But there's plenty of other examples. There's other books on psychic pets and other things as well that are out there. Let's see. I've not got a lot of faith in popular ghost hunting gadgets and apps. That's good. You should not. Do you think investigators could be psychically affecting them without knowing it? Yes, no question. We have especially things like the random systems that are supposedly in ghost boxes and obelisks and things like that. But yeah, we could be, there is something called the experimenter effect in science, especially in parapsychology. And it may be us that's affecting these things, not entities. I always wondered, honestly, when I got responses in, not responses per se, but interaction with an EMF meter. First of all, it's never been consistent with apparitions. A lot more consistent with hauntings, with residual hauntings. But with apparitions, I rarely ever even get EMF stuff that connects to the apparition. But on occasion you do, and if it's a non-digital one with a little needle, I always wonder if the ghost is going over there and flicking their spiritual finger at the actual needle to move it. In other words, it would be PK instead of actual EMF changes. And for that matter, we could be affecting the EMF device psychically, or the entity could, rather than actually picking up a true EMF reading with things, because we have those abilities as well. Let's see. I will say that the biggest problem with ghost hunting tech is that none of it can be designed to pick up ghosts. None of it, because we don't know what consciousness is made out of. We can only pick up the environment. All right. Are you watching Welcome to Derry? No, I'm not a big fan of the It movie, and Welcome to Derry is not very interesting to me. I am rewatching the old TV show Eureka, not that old, 2010, from the Sci-Fi Channel. It's actually on Prime Video. I finished watching Warehouse 13. I'm rewatching just about through the fourth season of Eureka, which is a fun show. Not psychic, but fun. Get the Mangoose. Okay, all right. Sine wave speech is a technique for synthesizing speech or replacing the words with pure tone whistles. I have no idea. I don't know that anybody's ever done anything with that at all. Some people can perceive it in real time. Others perceive it presence in recordings, then tweak it to make it intelligent. I've never heard of that, honestly. Not had anything about that. Randy Rogo, pets in ESP. Yes. Okay. Well, O'Donnell was a fiction writer, but O'Donnell also collected a lot of stories way back when. Scott Rogo's Pets in ESP would be I'm trying to remember if there's anything between O'Donnell's book and Pets in ESP. But thank you for mentioning that one. I think that was a book, and I seem to recall a book in the 1950s about psychic animals as well, that was out there. And there are a couple other, there are more recent books, but Scott Rogo, anything from Scott Rogo is worth reading. And I know that some things have come back into print, some things are still not in print. Hopefully, Cal Cooper will be getting more, working with the with Rogo's father, can get more material back into print. There's also, Dogs That Know When Their Owners Are Coming Home. Rupert Sheldrake, thanks for mentioning that. That's more recent. There are experiments on that front as well. But again, I think the side trailing thing is the most unique demonstration of animals being able to psychically track something, people, their owners in that way. Okay, and I think we're coming down. We've got about 8 minutes left. I do recommend Rupert Sheldrake's book, that book, and he's also done some other books as well. Uh, some with animals, some not so much. All right. Anybody else have? That was a nice, fast and furious piece. And Tina, as far as the sine wave speech, I'll look it up and see what it is, but I've not heard of anything related to our field at all for that. Let's come up. Ghost hunters are doing all sorts of unique things, some of which make sense, some of which make absolutely no sense. The Estes method makes no sense whatsoever to me, given the way it's done. That's a kind of a EVP setup methodology, which people are putting a lot of stock in, but has some serious flaws in it. Do I have a recommended reading list? That's a really good question. I have a recommended resources list on my website, which is lloydauerbach.com. I think I should do a recommended reading list. Typically, I've got recommended books listed in the bibliography of my other books, like ESP Hauntings and Poltergeists, and some of the other ones that are more recent. I will try to put together a recommended reading list for folks who are just getting into the field, just starting to look at things. Of course, I recommend my own books. I do recommend, so for besides my books, I also do recommend books by, I'm going to put this in the chat, D. Scott Rogo, wherever you can find his books, new or used. Again, some of them are reprinted. I recommend books by Dean Radin. He's got a new one out, looking at what we call magic and how that really shows demonstrations of psychic ability. This is something I studied in college as well. You want a recommended chocolate list too. Okay. Right off the bat, I'm going to leave it with Scott Rogo and Dean Radin to start with for things for this. Of course, it really depends on what potential subject you're interested in. If you're interested in reincarnation, Jim Tucker for reincarnation, Ian Stevenson for reincarnation. If you're interested in ghostly stuff, the books by Peter Underwood are always fun. He was the lead for the Ghost Club over in London for many years and there's a Ghost Hunter's Guide. He's wrote all sorts of books on hauntings around the world, mostly in the UK, of course. But there's some other folks as well. So I will, in my free time, I'll be doing the list. For chocolate, I'm just going to do this as the last thing. My favorite right now is fortunatochocolate.com. I love their chocolate. They have a wide range of flavors. Their dark chocolate's amazing. I just use their chocolate in a chocolate tasting for a group of people, and I rarely ever use milk chocolate. They make one of the best milk chocolates I've ever had. I'm not a big milk chocolate fan at all. I'm more of a dark chocolate person in general. And then there's one place you can go to which has a wide range, of really good brands of chocolate. They're all sustainably, they check out the companies. They have sustainable methodologies, and they usually pay the farmers a lot more, the cacao farmers. The two favorites right now from Bar and Cocoa that I love are Fire Tree Chocolate and Marana. But they have others, including Amano, which is a great one, and plenty of others. Um, it I keep on discovering new flavor, new companies. When I go to Bar and Cocoa, I buy different things from time to time and try them out. And but Fortunato is leaps and bounds above things, and they're experimenting in a lot of different ways. But I will try to put together a good book list. One thing I do want to mention for those of you that don't know, there is a site that many of you may or may not know about called the Internet Archive. That is simply, and I put the link in here, that is archive.org. If you use the text, you can look for these are public domain sources that are out there. So a lot of stuff before copyright, and the copyrights are different for books than they are for audio recordings and for video or movies and things like that, television. So if you use the text in the text search box, you search for the word psychical. You can search for ghosts, you can search for psychic, you can search for psychical, psychic with an AL, psychical research. You'll get, there are hundreds of books from the 1800s and early 1900s that are on this subject matter. Everything from ghosts to ESP, all sorts of stuff. Out of copyright, available for download in different formats. I have several hundred that I've downloaded over the years. And of course, as copyright starts moving, the expiration starts moving, you get more and more that are coming in. And it's just a treasure trove of information. If whether you're looking for stuff on parapsychology, psychical research, whatever, almost any subject, if they're older stuff, older things out of copyright, you can find them there. And really dive into it because it's a never-ending bunch of stuff. I found old movies that are out of copyright. There's old TV shows, some episodes of old TV shows that are kind of fun to play with. A lot of stuff that's there. And there's even something they have a special search engine called the Wayback Machine. If any of you have ever been interested in looking at what a website looked like 20 years ago, they go back to 1997 and even a little before that. I found an article by one of my colleagues who wrote an article for PC Magazine for the early 1990s using the Wayback Machine. My original website has been gone for a long time. I have my new one, which is lloydauerbach.com, but I can see the earlier versions of my original website back to the late 1990s on the Wayback Machine. You just need the URL, and you can find different dates and different forms of that. So I think I'll finish up on that. This is um, it's just a really, for those who may not know, it's a great resource. Librarians all know about it, or should know about it. If they don't know about it, I'm surprised, but it's an amazing resource. There's many other things. You can find old audio clips, some old music that's out of copyright, all sorts of stuff. Even you can even play, and I have done this. I've played various text-based computer games from the late 1980s in on the Internet Archive in emulation mode. You can even play other kinds of games. I even think I did play Pong once on the Internet Archive. For those of you who are probably not old enough to remember Pong, but that was one of the first computer video games that was out there. So that's it for me for tonight. I'll just mention that we've got two more shows for this year. Got one on December 7th. That's in 2 weeks. And then 4 weeks is the 21st. And then we're skipping 3 weeks and going to January 11th. I'll start the every other week, every other week, starting in January on January 11th. And I'm going to kick off 2026 with a special show where I'll actually have a guest. We'll have a discussion, but you can ask him questions as well. I'll have Steve Gonzalez, who you might know from the TV show Ghost Hunters. And normally I wouldn't bring somebody in from one of those reality shows, but Steve actually is a cool guy who knows something about parapsychology. One of the few reality TV stars who actually knew something even before the show about the field. Can't say that about the people he worked with. Anyway, I will see you all in 2 weeks. In the meantime, have a great and happy Thanksgiving. Take care.